Okay, so I'm gonna kick this off. Okay, so right here, what I have is a Shimano C3000HG-K. Okay, as you can see right here, awesome reel, totally awesome reel. Okay, well, this is where today's tip is going to come in really important. And I will say that I've already got this broke down to a spot to where I can easily manage with this time without taking all the rest of it off and going through this little tip seminar type thing. Okay, so for you Shimano C3000HG-K owners out there, okay, I'm going to show you how to actually save your reel from a lot of rust and corrosion buildup, therefore really extending its life. Okay, so if you guys would, if you're watching, if you find this to be important, or you know somebody that might have one of these reels, share it or invite them here. That way we can all do, get some justice out of this. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to perform maintenance on not only the anti-reverse roller assembly, but also the bearing that, in my opinion, wears out the fastest. Okay, and I say that for this reason. When I say wears out, I guess maybe I should say diminishes in quality faster than the rest of the bearings in your reel. Okay, now I don't know exactly why that is, but I've got a couple guesses. Like I said, I've always found that this bearing that's buried deep inside here is the hardest ones for an average consumer to get in there and clean and re-lubricate on a regular basis. Okay, so for time's sake, I've already got the spool and everything removed off the top of the spool shaft. I'm right here at the rotor, okay, and the nut that holds the rotor on. So let's get to it. Okay, so there's gonna be 2 screws right here. I'm gonna take these out, and you're gonna see me get into this, and you're gonna see how this works and why it's so hard to get in there to clean for an average consumer. Okay, make sure you're keeping track of all your parts. Okay, I'm gonna take this little rubber seal off. Now I'm at the the rotor nut. Okay, and there's a little thing right there. It says unscrew that way. All right, so I'm gonna unscrew that nut. While I'm holding on to everything else, keeping it all intact, laying out my parts in the same order that I took them off. Okay, now I'm gonna hold the body of this reel like this, and I'm gonna slowly rock this rotor as it comes off. Okay, so there's a part that's stuck in here. Okay, so I just had a part come off at the same time I pulled the rotor off, right? So whenever you're taking a reel apart, make sure that you're paying very close attention to washers or springs that may be loaded or sitting in places that you at first don't even recognize that they're there. Okay, so we pulled off the rotor. Now, continuing to work down the pinion gear and the spool shaft, we come to the anti-reverse roller bearing assembly. That's this black assembly that has all these parts in it. This is what keeps your well, one of its functions is to keep your pinion shaft rotating in one way and not the other. Some reels have a switch that you can turn that on and off, then your reel can go one way and the other. This reel does not. Okay, so right there. All right, you see, hopefully you can see this. Let me get this here. It's maybe hard to see, but can you see inside there? Okay, let me pull this off, that way you can. So basically you can see these little shiny things inside here. All right, these are roller pins that actually line this whole spot in here, okay? And what it is this little piece right here, it's like just a collar or bushing, right? It fits right inside there perfectly in a fixed position on the crankshaft, controlling its movement through this, okay? I guess I should say. Okay, so getting down to right here, okay? We've gone through everything. We've just removed the anti-reverse roller bearing assembly. Now we're right here, all right, at the commonly in the past, the complicated area, okay? Well, it's not that complicated, okay? Well, as you can see, if I could get the light to hit it just right, surrounding this pinion shaft, there's a bearing right there. You see the shininess? Let's see. It's kind of hard to see because of the light, but you can see a bearing surrounding that pinion gear, okay? I refer to that bearing as a pinion bearing, okay? Because it holds the pinion bearing or the pinion shaft into place, okay? So all I'm going to do, all right, is I'm going to grab this pinion shaft, pinion gear, and I'm going to just turn it a little bit, rotate it, and slide it right up and off the actual spool shaft, okay? So what have we accomplished this far, right? Well, we've accomplished a whole lot more than most people will ever do to clean their fishing reels. But it's important because it'll make them last longer if you keep them rust-free and corrosion-free. Well, now we have the ability to clean the walls inside here, clean as much of the spool shaft as you can access. We can clean the pinion gear. But most importantly, all right, here's that bearing I'm talking about, okay? It just seats itself right on that pinion shaft, that pinion gear, okay? Well, I think because of its location and most people's inability to access it to do any type of preventive maintenance, okay, this bearing, you know, ends up dealing with those inclement weather elements and that salt water more so than any other bearing in here. I feel like the two bearings on each side of the main drive gear, I feel like they're always pretty well protected. I never, unless a reel has been severely abused and neglected, I typically don't find, the first place I find rust and degradation of quality is on this pinion bearing. Okay, so like I said, let's get back to it. Okay, so it typically sits on there just like that. I'm going to put it back, run it back down. That way I can show everybody once more. Okay, you see it's back in there? It's real easy. All you got to do is rotate this, all right, and give it a little pull, and it'll slide right out, okay, leaving everything inside the reel intact. Okay, so when you get to this point, you know, this is the time that you can take and you can clean all these different spots that you can now access. You could take this bearing, you can clean it, you know, drop it in a little jar of oil overnight, you know, if it still feels good. And how I determine that is I'll hold these bearings on the outer race like this, then I'll use my other finger or a tool to put inside of it, all right, similar to that right there. And I will actually turn the inner race to feel how sketchy the quality is of that bearing. Well, normally it feels real bumpy, or a lot of times it'll even be seized up completely. But you can definitely, you know, kind of get a feel for what's going on by just holding that outer race into position, putting your finger on that inner race, and turning it like this. And this one actually feels really, really grungy, bumpy. You can really tell that there's some nastiness going on inside there. Well, lo and behold, they do make replacements. My choice are Boca bearing yellow seals. I know a lot of people hear me talk about orange seals and Boca bearing this, Boca bearing that. Well, these are actually the yellow seals, okay? When a lot of times customers will come to me and they'll ask me if I recommend orange seals for their spinning reels, and I always tell them no, not unless you want to spend, not unless you've got money that you want to spend and you want it to be as limp and loose and free as it could possibly be. But I don't recommend it because you're not really looking to get the same effect that you do out of a bait caster as far as free spooling capacity. Okay, the better your reel free spools, the longer you can cast, and those faster bearings allow for that. Well, a spinning reel is built differently, right? So you really just want the spinning reel to be smooth. Well, these yellow seals are actually $6 cheaper than the orange seals, okay? And the reason why I like making at least this jump from your standard stock bearing up to a yellow seal is because there's less material on this bearing to rust. Okay, there's not as much metal to metal contact. Okay, and so they come pre-lubed, and they come pre-lubed really well. You know, if I get one that seems to be like it's just a little too greased, well, I'll just use a razor blade just like this, and I'll find a little slot right here in the bearing seal between the yellow seal and the inner race, and I'll just pry that up out of there. I'll do the same to the other side, and then I'll clean the bearing, put these seals, clean the seals, re-oil it, put the seals back on, and it feels great. So this right here in the Shimano C3000HG-K, this is actually a 7x14x5 bearing. So the bearing that I took off of there that needed to be replaced, all right, it's the same size bearing, okay? It's the same deal, all right? I just choose to go with Boca bearing orange seals, as I've just stated why. Okay, so now that I've got my replacement, all right, which is, like I said, a 7x14x5. A lot of reels, a lot of spinning reels, they're either going to be, there's always some exceptions out there, you know, some reels like I don't know, I think it's the Penn Battles, they use something weird like a 5x8 by, I don't know, it's something weird, but it's most spinning reels out there, especially if you're looking at Shimano's, and for that part, even Abu Garcia spinning reels, they're either gonna have a 7x14x5 or a 7x13x4 sitting up here as this pinion bearing. All right, so I'm gonna put this back on there. All right, now I'm gonna do this one more time, and then the reel's going back together, then the tip seminar's over, okay? So basically what we just did was we replaced that pinion bearing that was bad, and we replaced it with a yellow seal Boca bearing. Okay, so the way you do that is you just grab this little pinion shaft right here, all right, and give it just a little pull, a twist and a pull, and it'll slide right off. That bearing just sits on there. You can pull it off, swap the bad one out for the good one. And then what I normally do, since we're here, is yes, you know, definitely put a little bit of lube on this pinion shaft. I always make sure to lube the part of this pinion gear that sits inside, that touches the inside, that touches that inner race of that yellow seal Boca bearing. Okay, and I always make sure to lube the walls of this area that it seats itself down into. All right, I put a little bit of oil on the spool shaft, and I just slide it down and twist it right back into place. All right, it's that easy. All right, so now that you've got all that cleaned, we're just gonna rebuild it real quick. All right, I'm gonna grab the anti-reverse roller bearing assembly, and I'm gonna pop that little sleeve out of there. I'm gonna slide it right down on top of that pinion gear. I'm going to grab the anti-reverse roller bearing assembly, which you can also clean. You know, you can look down inside here and you can see all these metal roller pins or these metal rollers, whatever you want to call them. It's fine with me, but my point is, though, is that now you can take some tools, take some Q-tips and run it around in there and get a bunch of that grease and that oil or that dirt and that grime, or even hopefully, I mean, you know, those little roller pins inside there have the ability to rust. And actually, I noticed it on a lot of them. There was a little bit in this one, but I was able to get most of it clean. And it's on. I would have actually replaced it straight up, being that it had rust, a little bit of rust on it, but this part is actually still back ordered, even at Shimano. So I couldn't get this part or the alternate. So there's, you know, if it's happening to other people, it's definitely a chance of it happening to you or me if we don't take care of our reels. So it's as simple as that, right? We just slide this thing back down and it'll fit itself right into place. Okay, you just look at the bottom of it, look at the top of this area, and you can just slide that right down over that collar and it'll seat itself right into place. Then you've got these 3 screws. All right, we're gonna put this thing back together for good until I can get in there and do some lubing. Had too much coffee today. I got the shakes. All right, and whenever I'm putting these screws back in, I'll always back them off just a little bit until you hear them pop into them same threads that they were. Okay, so now that we're right here, we're gonna drop this little weird collar back right in there. Gonna look at the way the pinion shaft lines up. Gonna line up that rotor, slide it down. Gonna grab that rotor nut, rotate it, turn it backwards. All right, gonna take that little rubber seal that we pulled off, slide it right back down, which is pretty cool. You know, good innovation and good ideas coming from people that actually use the gear when you see something like that, right? Because what it does is it actually acts as a kind of a blocker for any debris getting down there, working its way down there into that hole that's bored through all the way through the pinion gear that the spool shaft slides up and down in, right? If you start getting dirt and grime down in there, it's going to start getting all real scratchy and stuff. And not all companies do that, but Shimano does. All right, so I'm just going to put this back on. Make sure I got that nut lined up. So typically, right, just keeping this short and simple, when you start feeling your spinning reel start sounding like a coffee grinder whenever you're reeling in a lure or a fish, all right, and my first instincts are to consider the pinion bearing or the pinion gear, or not the pinion gear, the anti-reverse roller bearing clutch assembly as being the culprits of that problem. Just can't get this lined up. Dang it. Got to be on there perfectly. There we go. Little trick for those of you that have big fat fingers just like I do, right? I get a little bit of grease and I put it on the end of my little screwdrivers, and I use those to put all these screws back in and things like that. I'll check out the comments in a minute. All right, so there it is. It feels great. It doesn't have that that coffee can sound. It does. You can't feel it being all bumpy and stuff as it's turning. It's that easy. You know, I will admit, you know, some of us are a little bit more mechanically inclined than others, and I'll say that this is about the extent of my mechanical knowledge. You know, I can work on almost any fishing reel out there, but I can't work on a car or a weed eater or anything like that. So let me see. Okay, no comments. So yeah, that's it. That's how you kind of take care of the first parts of a spinning reel that actually go bad. In my opinion, and from my experience, that's what I've noticed. Okay, so it's all back together. It's not that hard, but you know, some people can get into it, some people can't. Some people are comfortable and confident in doing it, and some people aren't. More than likely, if you're feeling that grunginess when you're reeling in a lure or reeling in a fish, I almost guarantee you it's either the rust on the anti-reverse roller bearing assembly or that pinion bearing that I pulled out of there and showed you all how to swap out with a new one. What's up, Carson? Hey, dude. Cool. Well, that's the tip seminar. Share to anybody that you know that has these reels. I'm sure they'll appreciate it. I appreciate you guys for tuning in. This is actually a really valuable tip for these Shimano C3000HG-K owners, because if you don't get in there and clean those parts, if you don't know how to, and you just let it keep going, what ends up happening is one part rusts to another, those parts rust to another part, and then next thing you know, you've got this big block of seized up junk inside of a fishing reel, and it's not only parts seizing and rusting and corroding to each other, they're actually like fusing themselves to the actual frame itself. So, you know, it's important to catch this stuff early. If you can't service your own gear, you know, definitely take it in and get it done. Saltwater anglers, this is critically important for you. Yeah, of course. You know, especially saltwater anglers who live here in Central Texas, or actually for saltwater anglers who don't live on the actual coast and fish very often. You know, a lot of my customers that are here in Central Texas that are saltwater anglers, you know, they'll make monthly trips to the coast and go chase reds, trout, whatever. Well, they go make their monthly trek, you know, they'll spend a weekend there, then they'll come back and they'll sit here at home or, you know, be back here until they go back down in 3, 4, or 5 more weeks. Okay, so what happens though is when that angler comes back here to spend the next 3, 4, 5 weeks, he sets his reel down in one place and it never moves. And that is when the rust and the corrosion builds up and takes over and just ruins a reel. And then next thing you know, the day or two or 5 days before you decide to go on your trip to the coast again, a month or month and a half later, you've got a reel that you pick up and you check it out, and next thing you know, it feels just horrible, or it's rusted up and it feels all bumpy and grungy, and you know, that's because that's when that stuff took over. So I've got a customer, I gotta go, but if you need anything, need your reels worked on, give me a call at 512-294-3155. Look me up at PapaChopsATX.com. I'm right here in Austin, Texas. Thank you guys. Take care.